Welcome back. Moneyline it is. My guest is joining me right now, Micheal Oluwagbemi, a policy analyst. Mr. Oluwagbemi, thanks for joining us and welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
How you doing?
I'm all right. Thanks for having me again.
What would you say about the budget? MTEF 2018 budget proposal still at the National Assembly. I don't know if the members have gotten their copies now. You know, there are some things we shouldn't just be talking about in the country, you know. But give me your take about the budget.
Yeah, I think thanks again for having me and good morning to your guest. It's very important for us to first put things in perspective, right? The budget for the first time in many years is being submitted, I think, within the last quarter of the year, which is expected to be submitted, and especially it was submitted sometime, let's say, in the middle of the last quarter, which is, again, if we are quick to jump on those people who are in positions of authority, we should also commend them when they do the right things, like making sure the budget at least gets to the National Assembly on time. So I think at this moment, the onus is now on the National Assembly to begin to consider the budgets. The executive proposes, and the legislative actually is the appropriating arm of government in our constitution. So the onus is on the National Assembly to start doing their work, and on us as citizens and in this democracy to make our opinion on that budget known. First thing first. And the other thing is also when you look at the proposal itself, the proposal is for close to about 8.1 trillion naira, which puts you at about $28 billion, about just a little less than the 2010 budget on parity. The 2010 budget was about $29 billion. So we are basically almost at 2009 spending levels, even though our population easily had increased by 20% and our needs, I'm sure, have gone up by almost 100%. So while the budget itself looked big on paper, as far as Naira is concerned, the Naira has depreciated over the years, and the budget itself is just $28 billion. So we have to understand that the budget as it is today barely meets our needs as Nigeria, as a country, given especially where we are coming from. We're a country digging ourselves out of recession. We are also a country that has faced a lot of headwinds when it comes to the sales of natural resources, especially oil, which our economy is based on. We're also an economy that has suffered, I believe, many years of mismanagement economic-wise. So $29 billion as far as what the economy can take and what the economy needs is just scratching it on the surface. So we have to start getting a little bit innovative. The National Assembly, I believe, should start putting in place other instrumentalities, other ways of funding this economy and meeting the needs of the economy, both on the recurrent side and especially on the capital side. A country that sits on the vast gas reserves and is still suffering from massive power outages and also suffers from a dilapidating road infrastructure is one where $29 billion does not cut it. $29 billion, when I checked it, is about, it's not even up to the budget of the New York city, a city of less than 5 million people. And here we are, 120 million plus. Some say 180 million. 180 million.
The thing is that we don't even know how many
we don't know how many we are.
We need to count ourselves first.
Which is the first thing that you actually need to do if you want to get this economy back on its feet. Planning is very critical.
We should count ourselves, isn't it?
Very important.
We should know how many of us are in Nigeria.
So there are some few low-hanging things that you need to do. And again, this is what ails the budget. So I've talked about what is good about the budget in terms of submitting it on time, allowing the legislators to deliberate on it.
But is it really on time? Because even the legislators were complaining. I've listened to some legislators saying, okay, the president submitted it in October, but it's not even on time. The executive even missed its timeline because it missed its target, but still submitted it. And then the legislators are saying it's still not yet on time. So you don't need to even put the knives on our necks and say we should pass this thing quickly, because we also need to do due diligence. We do know that the year is coming to an end very fast. We have just less than 35 days to the end of the year. So what magic are we going to...
The legislators are paid to do their job. They are not supposed to go on vacation. In the United States, when the government wants to shut down, the legislators stay and work overnight. And they actually, some of them work through Christmas, Thanksgiving. Here in Nigeria, they declare 40 days out. So the legislators should do their job. They are paid to pass laws. They are paid to do their job. So I don't buy that. I don't buy that.
So they shouldn't go on recess.
They should not go on recess. They should stay in and do their work over Christmas. They should not go on recess. In everywhere in the world, when you have, that's what they are paid to do. They are the best paid legislator in the world, and yet they have the most holidays. So please, Nigerians should make their voice heard. Again, it's a democracy. The executive have done his own part. Propose. Okay, do you want the executive to present this budget on June 16 of this year, or June 12, June 10, 6 months before? No, well, it's the last quarter. That's what the Fiscal Responsibility Act says. It has been done within the last quarter. The legislature should step up and do its job, and they should stop complaining. Their job, they get paid the most in the world. That's on record. And if they get paid the most in the world, then they should do the most work. But unfortunately, we have a bunch of legislators that just complain, look for escape routes from doing their job. I would not buy that line that the executive somehow will do magic and present to them what it does not have prepared. Yes, it meets its own deadline, not the deadline set by the Constitution or by the law, Fiscal Responsibility Act. The Constitution and the law has already have very specific timelines about when the budget should be submitted, and it has been met by the executive. The legislator has 35 days. Those 35 days, public holidays are not recognized in the legislative calendar. The legislators set their own calendar, and they should step up and do their job. They should work over Christmas, they should work over the New Year, and they should provide us a budget by June 2nd, 2018.
That's January 2nd.
January 2nd, 2018. That should be done. I mean, I don't know, we take too many excuses from our legislators. Again, they are the ones that get elected at the grassroots. They are the ones that have the mandate of the people. That's why the Constitution puts it on them to examine these proposals and to make sure that Nigerians get value for their money. In terms of, you did mention about counting ourselves. When I look at the budget today, it's very, as usual, it is so dependent on the United States dollar and the value of the barrels of oil we sell. This is because we've not been able to figure out how to diversify government revenue. And I say that because I bear in mind that there's a difference between diversity in the economy and the diversity of government revenue. Nigerian economy, based on what we get from the NIPS, from the National Bureau of Statistics, shows that we are a pretty diversified economy when it comes to actual activity taking place within the economy. The problem is the government revenue does not reflect that. So government revenue has to reflect the economy itself. Oil and gas does not account for more than 10%. In that, and yet it accounts for about 90% of government revenue, one way or the other. I mean, give or take, now they do a little bit of jujutsu and say, oh, revenue to FIRS from oil and gas is not oil and gas revenue. But if you still drill it down to the details, those revenue depends on royalties and payments from the oil and gas industry or from oil and gas companies. If you drill it down, Nigerian government depends largely on revenue from the oil and gas sector or foreign exchange revenues in order to be able to meet its obligation. That should not be so. The economy is diversified. Government can only begin to diversify its own revenue when it enumerates the people. There has to be a process for identifying every Nigerian. And we can't say this enough. It's not just for the purpose, of course, of taxation. It's also for the purpose of planning. It's also for the purpose of being able to meet the needs of the people.
And a purpose of also knowing who your citizens are.
Of course. I mean, our next door neighbor in Cameroon, if you're above the age of 12, you're required to have an ID card. And it's actually almost a crime if they are stopped in Cameroon and you're asked to produce your ID and you cannot. In Cameroon, they don't just numerate their people, they also numerate their cattle, by the way. So every cow in Cameroon is counted, but here in Nigeria, we don't even count our people. So we need to do something about that, because if we want to diversify government revenue so that we can meet our diverse needs as a people, then we need to know who Nigerians are. So identity management, IDM, is a very important step, one that is yet to be done.
You know, I always say that what you can measure, you can manage.
Absolutely.
That there's a need for data, because you start planning by knowing the data you need to plan with. Just like you said, how many of us are Nigerians? I like the aspect that you brought in. How many cows are in Nigeria? How many cattle? I was coming from church on Sunday, just coming out of my church, and I saw cattle, many cattle on the streets of Abuja, and I was wondering that a law has been, isn't it? They were saying no cows again in the metro. Yes, in the federal capital. And you saw this little boy with cattle stopping us with cars, those walking on the roads. And I was like, is this a country where there is no law, or is it a jungle? You go around the world, I've not seen cattle moving on the road you know, they are kept where they need to be fed, where you also get maximum return from whatsoever agricultural venture you're putting in place. But that's okay, that's it. Thank you guys for, that's a picture.
That's a picture of that one, yes.
You see, I don't know what exactly is happening. But that brings me to the issue of how do we begin to plan when things are done haphazardly in the country. I've interviewed the chairman of the National Population Commission a few times, and he tells me, oh, Nancy, there's no money. We're told we will do census at the time. Is it this year also, census? Because the last census we did was, I think, in 2006. So where do we go from here that if we don't have adequate data, we need to know how many people are even unemployed in the country in the first place. Sure. We need to know how many people have jobs. We need to know how many people have jobs or are not satisfied with the kind of jobs. We need to know how many doctors we are churning out on a yearly basis. We need to know how many engineers we are churning out if we are a serious country that needs to develop. Yes, that wants to develop.
Yeah, well, I mean, data collection has to be depoliticized. That's the first thing we have to do as Nigerians. And I also think that maybe one way to also do it is also to put onus on the data collected. So what do I mean? Today in Nigeria, when you have a big population, you get revenue, you get allocation. How about, yeah, you get revenue, but you also get taxation. So then so quickly you see everybody will start, there's a responsibility that goes along with the benefits. Today there's almost only benefits. So therefore, there's almost like a grand plan nationally as a country that every locality, and that's why, honestly, based on GDP data, based on cell phone data, based on data that we have access to in terms of how businesses perform in Nigeria and what we actually see in our cities, the 180 million number is very doubtful as far as I'm concerned, and I can get into the details of that in a separate segment. In a separate segment, no, we're not. That's an overinflated number. That's even reflected in the voter database that we gather, which was and in the voter turnout and the maximum and the norm around the world when it comes to voting and all of those kind of things.
But it's the same population number that even international bodies grade.
They have to play. They have an incentive to play that game. They have an incentive to play that game. Any international organization have an incentive to say that Nigeria is a big population and they have a lot of needs and they need to throw more money here so that they can send more people here as experts to work here to save us. So again, that's a separate issue. Yeah, but the point is, yeah, it's a separate issue. But the point, we need to depoliticize the numbers. So the numbers have to just remain the numbers. And again, we don't need a massive population census. I mean, the MPC itself is at fault for a reason why we don't have a proper population data today. What you do in other climes is you take the existing databases that you have that somehow reflect the population, and then you merge those databases. In Nigeria, we have the cell phone registration, you have BVN, you have the voter registration database, and then you merge those databases, and then you use some mechanism to close the gap. For example, you can say if you or your parent is not registered on this database, that means you don't have this card that will produce. After merging the database, you don't have access to free education. You don't have access to free healthcare. You don't have access to it. So once you create those incentives, people quickly try to put themselves on the database if they are currently not on the database. But first, you merge the database, you get to about 80%. You leave about 20% out. That will be the old, the aged, the young.
I think there are talks around getting that, the driver's license.
Instead of talking, can we get to acting?
I think there's little action being done.
Yes.
But perhaps we've not seen the last of it, because I also know that NIMSI, for example, is also having some challenges in terms of, okay, when are we going to get total collection of how many people are Nigerians? Yes. Yeah,
NIMSI was celebrating registering the president when he became president, even though the president was already annexed head of state and was collecting pension. So NIMSI itself should know that there's a problem there. So the president is just registering as at May 29 or 30 of 2015, after collecting pension as a former head of state for many years and being a public servant, and yet was not on NIMSI database. That tells you that we are going nowhere.
Just like you said, that's another interview for another day, because I met a former senator some time ago. Was it 2 years ago or thereabout? And he did tell me outrightly, we met at an event here in Abuja, and we just got talking, and we got talking about population, and he told me, Nancy, I don't believe that Nigerians were 180 million people. And he felt so strongly about that.
I do the same way.
You do feel the same way. I think I'm going to do an episode on that. Perhaps get the MPC, National Population Commission.
All of us took it out.
Yes, to come on board. If you think Nigeria is 180 million plus and counting, say aye. If you say no, say nay. So my team should put that down. We're going to look at that. Yeah. Now, let's move ahead. You did talk about that the economic base of that the sectors are a bit diversified. You have oil and gas, you have services, you have non-oil sector, agriculture, manufacturing, but yet government revenue is not as diversified as the economy is said to be diversified. Of course, since after the rebasing in 2013, I think we did our rebasing in 2013. How do you think that government should diversify its revenue base beyond what it's doing now? Because if you take a look at what the government has done in the past few, at least since they came into office, it's done, you know, just a little in terms of diversifying revenue. You're seeing taxes now, a lot of talk about paying taxes, not necessarily increasing tax rate, but deepening the tax base. In terms of also, oil price has been favorable so far this year, 20% hike for oil price from around $25 it was in January 2016 to about $63 now. What else do you think government can do? Is there any other option apart from tax, apart from
there's a lot of other
minerals,
options. Yeah,
sale of minerals?
There are many things the government can do. One, the emphasis on tax collection have to reflect the structure of the economy. The large part of the economy is informal. So there's a black part of the economy which is almost out of the tax net. That cannot be captured by the tax net today. But that's because the collection of taxes is emphasized more so on the federal level. And the states have not been incentivized to actually collect the taxes they need to collect. So today, and that is also reflected in terms of, because the government today is top heavy. So you have so much emphasis on the federal government and the central government. If we shift our thinking and shift the structure of the government such that power is truly devolved to the state government, and the state government have more incentive to actually go and collect these taxes and also to perform their duties and now contribute to the center, not the other way around. Because this country, people do not realize it, up to the 70s, it was the state governments that made allocation to the federal government, not the other way around. Today now, state government come to Abuja every month and collect money and go back to their state. It should not be so. And that's, again, reflecting on the fact that we've written our laws, our constitution, the exclusive list is too long. There are too many. As a result, the federal government have jurisdiction over way too many sectors of the economy that it cannot truly collect taxes from. I give you an example, mining. Over the weekend, the Minister of Steel and Mines was still in a lecture in Federal University of Technology, Akure, was still saying that the mining sector should be removed from the exclusive list. If the mining sector is taken from the exclusive list, that opens up a big sector for states to actually tax. And then when states collect those taxes, then they will have an onus. Something we also.
Who was the minister talking to? Is the minister is on the cabinet?
Of course.
He's in the kitchen cabinet, so to speak of Mr. President. So who is he telling that?
I agree.
Me or you?
I agree.
Should tell Mr. President
they
that.
should be removed. Exactly. They should do their work.
Yes.
Because ultimately, when you have a sector, for example, mining covers everywhere from gravel mining to crushing rocks to removing just sand, and these are basic things. There's no way the federal government will come to my locality in Ekiti State to supervise and to superintend on the removal of a mountain or a rock. For God's sake, it makes no sense that the federal government should have exclusivity over that particular sector. And so we should look at the exclusive list in the first place and ensure that we reduce and scale down the scope of the federal government's activity so that the states can collect these taxes and then pay the federal government's share to it. That's one. Two, the federal government needs to emphasize formalizing the black economy. So we need to put in place things that will formalize those sectors. Sectors like retail is largely out of federal government or government, whether federal, state, or local government control today. A lot of things goes on in that sector that does not come within their jurisdiction. Real estate, a lot of real estate transactions. I mean, we have a bunch of people that basically use that sector for money laundering. But again, houses get transferred, land gets transferred, and government doesn't take its share. So again, we need to look at property taxes. It's largely out of the jurisdiction of federal government. But again, the states and the federal and the local governments have no incentives whatsoever to collect it. Again, if you don't do those things, then you will never be able to diversify the revenue base. But even more importantly, what I've said initially, there has to be some mechanism to actually know every Nigerian. That is going to be your first point, your easiest, and it's actually easy. This is a 3 to 6 month project. If you ask any technology expert, we already have the databases, merge them. Once you start merging them, find the holes between them, clean it up. 18 months, you have a database pretty much over 80 to 90 million Nigerians. Then we can work from that answer forward. Now we have to make sure that every kid born in Nigeria, every death recorded in Nigeria is just added to that database, and the database is always updated. And we never have to spend 10 billion, 50 billion, 100 billion naira every 10 years on wasteful census that is always politicized. Again, we have to start doing things right.
Do you think there's a need for a census?
We don't need a census. We don't need the census. Nobody does census like that anymore. Unfortunately, we can't keep doing things like we're in the Stone Age. Nobody goes door-to-door enumeration. Nobody does that kind of census anymore. In Nigeria, almost every Nigerian I know has a cell phone. We already have our SIM card registration. About 129 million Nigerians on that database. We have about 29 million Nigerians on PVN. We have about 65 million Nigerians on electoral votes. The intersection of these 3 databases alone will cover, if not at least 110 million Nigerians solid data that we're going to have. If you ask me, the only people that are left out of that pool will be extremely old, sick, insane, and children.
People.
Most poor
because
people.
Most Nigerians are extremely poor.
Most poor actually register to vote. The people that don't register to vote are you and I. We take off during the election time and we are free to vote. So most poor people will be captured in the INEC databases. So we already have, and the INEC databases also come with a telephone number. BVN comes with a telephone number. The SIM card definitely comes with a telephone number.
But there are still a lot of people that are financially excluded in the country.
Again, I will go back. I will go back.
The banks. How many people have
I will
bank
go
accounts?
back. We
still have a lot of.
I will go back to your INEC. INEC database is probably the best when it comes to the poorest of the poorest. So when we take the INEC database and we merge it with BVN and we merge it with the SIM card registration that we have, we will have covered most active Nigerians in the economy, except the young. So the people that will be excluded in this intersection will be people that are 18 years and below, as at the time when they took all of these registrations. Or some 18 years will be covered, but not a lot of them. So what you now need to do is to put in place things at the gateway. Most 18-year-olds, and they're coming into the workforce, the number one gateway all of them has is a GS3 exam. So anybody that have written GS3 exam in Nigeria up to date, capture their database.
That is perhaps after SS. Do you have 18-year-old in GSS3?
We have to make some broad, we have to make some broad assumptions. So these things are doable. We just have not put our mind. Again, I always say something, that there's no problem that Nigeria has that a Nigerian cannot solve. Moreover, after all, we created a problem. So it is not a problem for us to get the accurate database of who Nigerians are, and then move from then onwards to actually start planning.
We are coming back to this data thing in today's edition of the program. Perhaps I really need to talk about data again. I've talked about it a few times on the show, but perhaps we just need to emphasize that we need to measure ourselves so that we can manage ourselves better.
And our resources,
And our resources. Let's talk about the OPEC meeting in Vienna coming up this Thursday. Are you interested in that? You're watching that meeting. Will it be a key one for OPEC members? Oil prices being at around 63, 64 US dollars so far. From 52 US dollars in August.
Absolutely.
A good increase so far for oil price. And I guess our officials will be elated because for 2017 budget, the benchmark was 44.50. For this budget, 2018, $45. I think
as an energy man myself, I'm interested in anything that goes on in OPEC. It's good that the oil prices are recovering, but we should not make the mistake of celebrate too fast in terms of what we do with the revenue that will be coming henceforth from it. Oil prices are historically has always been unstable. If there's any particular commodity where you can experience shocks as quickly as you experience rise, is oil and gas. For us as a country, I think the most important thing for us is to be conservative in our spending, and also to focus on diversifying the oil resources itself. Because today we have so much emphasis on our crude oil while we are flaring our gas, whereas we're a gas majority country. Right? We have more gas than oil.
We have about 187 trillion cubic feet
of gas.
Trillion cubic feet.
So we should be looking at how do we monetize, how do we take advantage of the rising energy price, which is actually more political because of the crisis we have in the Middle East, Saudi Arabia, and all of these things going on there, is actually encouraged the increase in the price of crude oil. that is probably good generally for the commodity. So we should be looking at taking advantage of this to monetize our own gas resources, to also make sure that we take the revenue we are getting from oil to invest in the infrastructure. And these are a few things that were done properly in the budget. So let's go back to the budget. The infrastructure sector, the agriculture sector, as well as security benefited a lot from allocations in the budget. This needs to be the emphasis. This should always be the emphasis, because infrastructure is a way that you actually get the other sectors of the economy to work well. So if you invest in your infrastructure, your roads, your rail, your airports, those things attract additional investment so that you can get more money to invest in the economy and create more jobs. When you create more jobs, then you can have more revenue in the government hands. So it's important that while we should not celebrate too fast, in Vienna, we should focus on trying to retain our preferential position, because we got that concession because Nigeria did not participate in the massive, in the last increases because of our militant issues. We should continue to press the case that our oil revenue as a country relative to our population is minuscule. So we take advantage of the 180 million number, as the case may be in this case, to ensure that we get some OPEC exemption. I think the Minister of State had done a fine job of maintaining that exemption. We should continue to push to maintain that position.
How do you think that the geopolitical tensions, especially as it concerns Saudi Arabia and Iran, who are members of OPEC, would affect perhaps this meeting in Vienna? Because those are two countries that have been at loggerheads, at least in the past. And will that also... would we see some kind of loggerheads in the room when there's a closed door between Saudi Arabia, Iran, and perhaps Russia on one end?
Yeah, Russia is an observer in OPEC. Saudi Arabia and Iran have always been geopolitical rivals. But I think anytime when it comes to their own pockets, both of them know how to behave themselves. So I don't expect that the loggerheads itself will translate into a dissension that will lead to the breakup of the cartel, or the inability of the cartel itself to set favorable conditions. Both of them are important, but by themselves they don't make APEC or OPEC. For us,
but there are two key members.
Yes,
Saudi Arabia,
they are
biggest producer. I think Iran is the second biggest.
Iran is also very important for the other commodity,
Iran,
which is gas.
Iraq,
Iraq is big, but Iran is more important for the gas commodity. So when it comes to OPEC, Iran's clout is not as big as you will expect.
But Saudi Arabia
is quite influential. And Saudi Arabia, as a result, I think that's the reason why countries like Nigeria will be able to maintain some concession, because Saudi Arabia will try to make sure they keep as many countries like Nigeria on its side when it comes to anything ex-OPEC. Again, I don't expect cartel members to shoot themselves in the feet. I expect that there will be some kind of determination to maintain oil prices at a favorable level, because the United States has truly revved up its production and is now exporting. The export ban from the United States was removed November of last year, and now we're beginning to see the U.S. crude oil show up in the international market, and it's already rivaling production from Russia. United States, for the first time last month, was the highest producer in the world, displacing both Saudi Arabia and Canada. So again, and Russia, sorry. So this is a real threat to OPEC members, and so the OPEC members will have to act in best interest. And I don't think that this little issue and snafu they have with themselves. You
still see the production cuts?
I think they're likely going to just maintain the current levels, because the U.S. stock is coming on board, and they need to squeeze that out.
And they also need to make gains more with the prices, because if you're taking a look at this economy, Saudi Arabia is also grappling with its budget in terms of balancing its budget. Now let's come over to this discussion just for 2 minutes. The minimum wage committee, the president set up a 30-man committee yesterday. What do you think? The minimum wage on the table again. Yesterday, while I was observing that, someone said just close to me, oh, this is a political gimmick. 2019 is just 2019 is just down the line, and the president wants to start creaming, people to its side for 2019. What do you think? But it's a topic that has been on the bench for a while. What do you think?
Yeah, I think we need two things. I mean, the first reaction anyone will have, knowing where we are coming from, is, so here we go again, right? We spend almost about 90% of our recurrent budgets on paying salaries. And you and I know that the first impact of a minimum wage increase is the federal civil service, which is, in my opinion, is already taking way too much of its share. 1% of the population taking about 70% of the budget as at last count. In fact, if you look at the budget, the way it is structured, because of the debt that we have to take, the 2.5 trillion of debt that we have to take, is equal to 2.5 trillion of capital expenditure. That means we are spending all the money that we bring in cash on paying salaries and recurrent expenditure, while everything that we are borrowing, we are using to build an infrastructure and new things. So we are already spending 100% of our earnings as a country to pay salaries. And now we are being asked to basically increase that. I think the president is, I will want to believe, and not to be cynical, that the president is trying to do what he has promised under the manifesto of the party, that minimum wage will be revisited. So the party never said minimum wage will be increased. It only said minimum wage will be revisited. So it's being revisited before the election. So if the election time comes, the president can say, we are revisiting it, the report is still in motion in progress. So maybe I'm not being cynical there. I'm just saying, hoping that that's what it is. Now, to the question of the philosophy behind minimum wage itself is not wrong. Let's remember this. Minimum wage actually means that you are expecting that everybody, and I've seen some people make an argument that it should apply only to the federal civil service, it should not apply to the state government. Actually, the reality is the minimum wage law should apply to every sector, not just public, also private. Everybody should have. The minimum wage is basically saying the government is enforcing a social policy, which is in the first section of the Constitution, that every Nigerian has a right to some basic social need and welfare. So that's the point of the minimum wage law.
Okay, I think we'll leave it at that. Many areas to expand on from this interview, but we'll leave it at that for now. Johnson Isaiah says on Twitter, your guest is excellent in all his presentation.
Thank you, Johnson.
While Ahmed says the intersection of the INEC, BVN, and SIM card registration database should give a reliable population data and identity of Nigerians. Hence, no need for a population census. Dele Jackson says our economy is still technically in recession because the recovery failed to drive a strong rebound. Omar says FG should look at formalizing the black economy, just like you said. I think that's the much we can take on today's edition of the program. Many thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks a lot,
Nancy. And wish you a lovely day.
Thanks a lot.
All right, I've been speaking with Micheal Oluwagbemi, a policy analyst, and we've been looking at the state of the Nigerian economy, which consistently seems to be a topic here on the program, because the state of the Nigerian economy is ongoing till we get to El Dorado. Even when you get to El Dorado, there's still more room for improvement. Many thanks for joining us. Thank you for your tweets. Thank you for your comments. Please join us again tomorrow, same time on this channel. Be the best you can be and be the change that you want to see. I am Nancy Nnaji. Bye now.